And we're back.
We are back. Welcome. My name is Morris. That's Bryan, and this is Dream Idiots, where each week Bryan and I tell each other stories and try to bring you along for the ride. Sometimes they're from history, sometimes they're our own personal misadventures. Other times it might be a little bitty works of fiction. You never know what you're going to get with us, and today is no exception.
That's
Bryan,
true.
where can the good folks find us?
Well, you can find us on all kinds of podcast platforms. So you're listening to us on one right now. If you can, please give us 5 stars and shoot us a review if you don't mind. That's helpful to us somehow. I don't really know how. You can check us out on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Dream Idiots. We're at dreamidiots.com. We have some merchandise and other things there. You can see the whole back catalog of our stuff. We have some merchandise there as well, and we're even on Patreon if you want. Also at Dream Idiots. And you can drop us a line by email if you'd like. That is dreamidiotspodcast@gmail.com.
This is episode 123, which means Bryan will be getting us started here in a little bit. But first, we have something interesting. We have our first guest on the show, and we're calling them our guest geniuses.
Not guest idiot. That'd be unkind.
We're the
Well,
idiots. The
it
guests are the
could be
genius.
accurate.
It's Maggie Kent. Hey Maggie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Could
Absolutely.
you,
Thanks for joining us.
Bryan has used some of your work in the past as stories, and it's been terrific. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and where you are and how you got into what it is that you talk about?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. So my name's Maggie, as was previously mentioned. I'm the brain. I won't go so far as to say genius, but I am the brain behind the blog Priceless about art crime. And you guys have used a couple of my articles in the past, which is great. Thank you for that.
Even last week.
Even last week. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
That's right.
So that kind of came about. I've always been super interested in art. I mean, that was something that we did as kids with our parents. We would go, so I live in Toronto, so we'd go to the Art Gallery of Ontario, we'd go to other art galleries in Canada. And then anytime we traveled, both of my parents are super interested in art. So they kind of exposed us to a lot of it at a young age. So that's always been something that personally I've been really interested in. And then over COVID, with the kind of true crime wave, people getting into that, I started getting into it as well. It really sucks you in. And I was applying for a master's program. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I wasn't working because it was COVID, and I needed a little project. I just wanted something to do that wasn't applying for schools all day. So I decided to start a blog, and kind of marrying those two interests of art and true crime seemed like a logical thing for me. So in the beginning, it was literally just my mom, shout out Wendy, who was reading my blog. And now, a few more people read it, but mostly it's just a fun exercise for me. So when I find out that people have read it, people enjoy it, that's really fun. It's really gratifying. So I appreciate that from both of you.
Yeah, and it's really a cool selection of stories too that you've worked on. I mean, every case is different. It's really, really cool stuff.
Oh, yeah, totally. And when people find out that that's something that I'm interested in or that's something that I write about, people will email me things that they've heard about, or they'll send me like the title of an article that they saw that they think I should look into. And every time I go down that rabbit hole, it is inevitably something super interesting. So it's great. It's a fun exercise for me.
Yeah,
Very nice.
I've stolen two or three, and there's one more I know that I will use. And actually, I sent you a story that I think you're going to write on at some point here soon. Don't tell Morris.
Yeah, I am.
Um, because I might want to use that as well at some point. But if you didn't listen to last week's talking about Miriam Khan and her painting, Morris's reaction to it is hilarious because that is a very off-putting painting, but
It is. And like on purpose, it's off-putting.
Yeah.
right. It is hands. I mean, whatever the second most viscerally negative painting is that I've seen, I can't tell you what it is because it's so far down. But it's
Yeah.
so
No,
good stuff. So
she accomplished what she wanted to accomplish with that.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Typically what we do here is Bryan and I don't tell each other what's coming, so we surprise each other.
Okay.
But this time we did collaborate a little bit because we wanted to be kind of in the same wheelhouse for our guest genius. So that's kind of what we did this time around. And because Bryan gets to go first on odd number episodes, Bryan gets to go first today.
All right, here we go. This is I know this is a story you both will have heard of, especially Maggie, considering your interest in art. I went back and looked. I didn't go back and look through everything you've written on, so I don't know whether you've written about this or not. But I suspect this is a story you have some insights into. So for my story, we're going back to March of 1990. So just picture the scene. It's St. Patrick's Day in Boston, Massachusetts. So late on the 17th, very early on the morning of the 18th. It was a Saturday night and early Sunday morning. So the average blood alcohol content for the greater Boston area is probably just dangerously high, near blackout drunk high. A young couple is walking home or maybe stumbling home after a night of drinking. A young woman can't walk well. She's being given a piggyback ride by her boyfriend. Curiously, they spy a hatchback parked just off Palace Road. You'd imagine this would be a night where every single available cop in the city was probably on duty. They just see two officers sitting in the front seat of a car, a nondescript hatchback on a side street. Well, that's weird. This couple and other passersby reported later that they definitely saw Boston police patches and the very distinct Boston police uniform. I can totally imagine one of these officers rolling down the window and saying, "Yeah, just keep on walking, park the car in the yard, go Celtics, go Red Sox, go Patriots, get on home." But no one apparently even tried to talk to them at all. So the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum opened to the public in 1903 and was the brainchild of, you guessed it, Isabella Stewart Gardner. It basically originally housed her personal collection of art and really has become, over 100 years, more than 100 years, a very prominent museum in America, in North America. She died 100 years ago, but she left a $3.5 million endowment for its ongoing care. And she left guidelines that it would always be free and open to the public, and that no items were to be altered or removed from the collection. In the 1980s, the museum was struggling, running low on money, and it sounded like for the better part of a decade, they were fighting with the board of trustees, struggling with security issues. At the time, 40 years ago, the cost for a security system, infrared cameras, and other measures was just expensive and was mostly deemed to be prohibitive and not worth it. They did install some infrared motion detectors through most of the facility, as well as a CCTV system just around the exterior, but no cameras are installed inside. Additional security guards are hired, but the only means of alerting police, quickly anyway, is by pressing a button at the front security desk. By 1990, it seems to be somewhat in dispute whether or not the facility had sufficient security or not. Opinions definitely vary. Security guards at the time were only paid slightly more than minimum wage, and it was basically an open secret among at least the security staff, that they thought the place was substandard. So returning now to the morning of March 18th, 1990, our cops are parked in their little hatchback, so apparently a few hundred feet from the side entrance to the Gardner Museum. The museum has two guards on duty this night. They are Rick Abath, who's age 23, and Randy Hestend, age 25. I'm going to call them Rick and Randy because their last names are hard to say. Their security protocol mandated that one guard would endlessly be patrolling the galleries with a flashlight and a walkie-talkie while the other stays at the front desk. So Rick takes the first patrol and Randy's at the desk. Fire alarms sound in several rooms, but he can't locate any fire or any smoke. He goes to a security room where there's a fire alarm control panel. That panel indicates that there's smoke in multiple rooms. He dismisses it, he says later on, as being some sort of malfunction that had occurred, and he disables the panel before going back onto his patrol. Before completing his rounds, heading back to the security desk, Rick stops at the side entrance to the museum.
And puts out a cigarette.
Briefly, he opens the side door and then shuts it again. But it does not tell Randy that he has done this. Rick gets back to the security desk around 1 a.m. and then they swap. At 1:20 a.m., the cops arrive, pull up to the side entrance. They park, they walk to the side door, and they ring the buzzer, which connects them to Rick through an intercom. And they explain that police are investigating a disturbance in the area, and they have to be let in. So Rick can see them on the CCTV system, and it appears that they are wearing police uniforms. He's not aware of any disturbance in the area, but he assumes it's St. Patrick's Day. Someone's doing something stupid, and they've shimmied up a drain pipe. They've come over a fence, whatever. Right? He's not concerned. He assumes someone has called the police. Rick buzzes them in at 1:24 a.m. These cops pass through a foyer and then come to the security desk and walk up to Rick. And as they're approaching him, they ask him from a bit of a distance if there's anyone else in the building. Rick confirms, yes, Randy is here too. Gets on the walkie-talkie, calls Randy down. Rick would say later that it appeared to him that cop number one had what appeared to be a fake mustache he was wearing. Cop number two tells Rick that, Rick, you look familiar to me, and I think you might have a warrant for your arrest, and demands that Rick come out from behind the desk and show his ID. Cop number two, as Rick comes around, cop number two grabs Rick, forces him against a wall, spreads his legs, handcuffs him. About this time, Randy comes trundling into the lobby, around at the security desk, and cop number one, the guy who's seemingly in charge, grabs him, spins him around, handcuffs him as well. So luring Rick away from the desk appeared to be a means of getting him away from the panic button, the only means of calling for help. So now both guards are in handcuffs. The fire alarm incident may have only been a coincidence, but that seems to be a point of contention as well. This is when cop number one, the one with the fake mustache, announced rather dramatically, quote, "This is a robbery," unquote.
This is a blockbuster movie.
Right. And so very much it brings back sort of Die Hard to me, but it's that like kind of over the top way. The thieves wrap duct tape around both these guys, their heads, cover their eyes, cover their mouths. Without asking for any directions, they walk these guys to the basement, and both these guys are handcuffed to a steam pipe and a workbench in the basement. These thieves explain to the guards, go through their wallets and explain to them, look, now we know where you live, and if you don't inform authorities, you're going to receive you'll receive a cash reward in about a year's time. And it took from them coming in to having these two guards subdued and in the basement takes less than 15 minutes. So cop number one, or fake cop number one, is definitely large and in charge, and he's seemingly leading the operation. Is asking he's definitely in charge. Cop number two is more concerned with the guards' comfort and is asking them if they're okay, and he's worried about their well-being. But they're now stashed in the basement, and they're placed in opposite corners of the basement, so they're over 100 feet apart. So not close by. And I just imagine them both sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, I am so fired." The thieves start to then move around the building. So they have subdued both of the guards by 1:35 a.m. and seemingly nothing happens for 13 minutes. They definitely go back upstairs, but none of the sensors go off until 1:48 a.m. So during this they finished subduing Beavis and Butthead in the basement. So they're taken care of. It was sort of speculated after the fact that maybe they're waiting around just to make sure that cops aren't on the way. So they're kind of hanging out in the lobbies to see if they see flashing lights or who knows what. But so 13 minutes are just wasted. The thieves then head into the Dutch room, which is on the second floor of the museum. A sensor goes off intended to alert patrons when they're getting too close to artwork. And sensors indicate later on that this sensor is smashed. They grab a painting called "The Storm on the Sea of Galilee" and another called "A Lady and Gentleman in Black." Take them down from the wall and smash them on the floor to break the glass. Quickly using some sort of blade or box cutter or something, they cut the canvases out from the stretchers. They also grab a large Rembrandt self-portrait oil painting, but the set, they took it down, but then left it leaning against a cabinet, deciding it was probably too big. It's actually painted on wood, not canvas, and would just be too unwieldy. They did take a small Rembrandt self-portrait etching that was on display that was quite a bit smaller and easier to schlep out of there. And they also removed something called Landscape with Obelisk and the concert from their frames. In this room, they also grabbed what's called, I think it's pronounced gu, it's GU. It's a Chinese, basically goblet, or it's a
I think it's like for serving wine or serving some sort of beverage in there.
Yeah. And so it's like 3rd century BC. It's the oldest piece that they wind up taking. At 1:51 a.m., one thief is still in the Dutch room. The other one goes down the hallway to what's called the short gallery. It's out the opposite end of the second floor. A few minutes later, they're now both in the short gallery because the sensors are going off and can read 2 people in this room. They apparently attack a display that's housing a Napoleonic flag. And it's screwed into some sort of display case. So some of the screws are taken off, but they give up halfway through because when it's found later, some screws are gone, some are still there. They do rip off the exposed eagle. There's a finial on top of the flagpole. They do rip that off and take that. Also in the room, they grab 5 Degas sketches that are all like 1 foot square pieces. And then the last work they grab is Chez Tortoni. It's from the Blue Room. It's the only piece of art they grab from the first floor. The motion detectors didn't detect any motion from within the Blue Room, even though this one piece was taken from there. The only footsteps detected in that room that night were Rick's when he walked through the room earlier. And so I don't know enough about security technology to know what that means. Were they only wearing socks? Are these guys ninjas? I don't. So apparently they went through incredibly quietly, and so sensors didn't even detect they were there, I guess. So as they're getting ready to leave, the thieves go back down to check on the guards in the basement and check to make sure they're comfortable. They come back upstairs, go to the security director's office. Where they endeavor to swipe video cassettes. Remember video cassettes? Yeah, like VHS. Oh, geez, that makes me feel old. So video cassettes of who knows what format that contained the evidence of them coming in. They also swiped some printouts that I guess were there that were registering info from the motion detectors. So they grabbed that, even though all that data is actually being saved off onto a hard drive. The frame for Chez Tortoni is actually, they don't take that out of the frame until they get to the security director's desk. So the frame for that is found in that office. And then they decide, okay, well, it's time for us to get out of here. So the side entrance doors are opened at 2:40 a.m. and then again for the last time at 2:45 a.m. So they were in there for 81 minutes. The amount of time spent in there, it reminds me when I was 15 or 16, the house I grew up in was robbed one time when we were out of town, and my sister-in-law found that someone had been there, and it obviously had been more than one person because every stitch of electronics in our house was taken. But one person decided to take the time to grab an apple from our kitchen, eat the entire thing, and leave the apple core for us. So this feels like an extra sort of fuck you. This is not it's not the Thomas Crown Affair, sort of smash and grab approach. It's clear that they were prepared. They knew where things were.
Yeah.
And they knew that they had plenty of time. So they sort of, they could be methodical about it. Next guard shift arrives later in the morning, and they obviously they quickly figure out that something's wrong because they can't find anybody. The security director shows up with his keys, and there's no one at the desk. They call the police. Police then come and they find Beavis and Butthead in the basement, and so that's where they realize what has really happened, and then I'm sure the press goes crazy. So In total, 13 works are taken. At the time, they had an estimated value of $200 million. That estimate was raised to 500 million by 2000. Now it's closer. Its estimated value of $600 million. It is still viewed as the highest value museum robbery in history. Taken were the concert by Vermeer. Um, the Storm on the Sea of Galilee is the Rembrandt. The other Rembrandt works were taken were A Lady and Gentleman in Black, the small postage stamp sized etching, and they may have swiped landscape with obelisk, thinking it was a Rembrandt, even though it wasn't, because it had a similar style. They took the 12th century BC Shang Dynasty goo, and then the other pieces, the other small pieces from the Degas pieces from the short gallery. And so, a staggering loss for this facility, obviously. And Chez Tortoni is the Edouard Monet piece was the only piece taken from the first floor. The mix of the items is what sort of has puzzled folks for a long period of time, and the fact that they were sort of rough with the artwork indicates to some people that they don't think these thieves were commissioned to steal them. Um, Gardner's will decrees that nothing in their collection should be removed, and so even now the frames for these things are still hanging in their respective locations in the museum as basically as placeholders, hoping for their safe return. There is still a $10 million bounty out there for their return, but we're going on 34 or 35 years. There is a whole host of theories about who did this and why they did it. I'm not sure how much of this is really even worth going into. The Brick, the one security guard, died earlier this year. Actually, I remember seeing. I saw part of an interview with him. He was definitely looked at very, very closely and was given a lie detector test at one point, which had inconclusive results. But he did open and close that side door, which may have been, in some people's minds, a signal. And he apparently alleged that he did that all the time. It could well have been to smoke a cigarette, but the computer printouts reflecting his movements and all these sensors don't show that he ever did that. Why various motion detectors in different locations work sometimes and didn't work at other times seems a little bit suspicious. And so he may or may not have been involved. But the FBI, even though he was looked at very closely, the FBI was sort of dismissed both guards as just being too stupid to have been involved. Frankly, I mean, they were just incompetent. And they couldn't have done this. The other allegations, was Whitey Bulger involved? So he's heavily involved in organized crime.
Oh, wow.
At the time, he denies involvement, but he's sort of pissed that he doesn't seem to know who's involved because it happened on his turf, and he basically wants a tribute. He wants to know who did it, and he wants to make sure he gets a cut of these proceeds. And so and he had very, very close ties to police, so he could either conceivably get his hands on police uniforms, or maybe he could just get cops to do this. So that was alleged at one point. There was another guy named Bobby Donati who was also in organized crime that was alleged.
My favorite suspect.
What's that?
That's my favorite suspect. That's who I think is behind it. Personally.
Yeah, that's after all the reading and things I did. I mean, that seemed to be the most likely candidate. So he's also heavily involved in organized crime. He's murdered in 1991. It is alleged that his associate is a guy named David Houghton were the two fake cops who did this. Depending on whose version of events you like, they did this either to capture this artwork and then sell it so they could get out. There's another criminal in the area, a guy named Miles Connor, who's a known art thief who's in jail at this time, and they were going to basically bounty this artwork in order to free Connor. But there's another criminal who would claim, nearly 20 years later, a guy named Ferrara who claimed that they were stealing this stuff in order to get money to get him out of jail at the time. So again, completely hard to know, what happened. But if both these two guys are dead and died within about 2 years of the crime, there's every reason to think that this artwork, if it's been hidden, is never going to be found. The other sort of weird thing that's connected to it is there is a journalist named Tom Mashberg who was looking into this in the late 90s and did some digging. The FBI was investigating at one point a antiques dealer who was also a criminal as well, a guy named William Youngworth. And Mashberg claimed at the time in the late 90s that Youngworth took him to a warehouse in Brooklyn. I should imagine that closing scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, this huge room just full of shit. And Mashberg claims that Youngworth, took him to this room full of, basically cardboard tubes and unfurled, at least one of the pieces of art that had been stolen. But by several months later, when the FBI raided this facility, all this artwork is now gone. And so this stuff is all still missing. Mashberg actually just wrote in March of this year, sort of we're going to circle back to the Gardner Museum story, and here are my takeaways from the interesting things from this story. In his story from just 5 months ago, he mentioned several things that I just mentioned that are interesting little touchstones related to the story. But what he fails to mention in this story is that he claims that he saw one of these pieces of art in a warehouse in 1997. He glosses right over that. So I don't know. It's a super cool story. I don't know how you can why you would steal a $200 million piece of art and expect to get away with it, because I don't know what, hard to know what motivates someone to do that unless they just really, really want a Rembrandt.
Yeah, the only thing that motivates you is that you want to hang it in your home, because you cannot sell a piece of art like that. It is too valuable. It is too recognizable. Anyone like that you're trying to sell it to is going to know something about art. And the second that they see that, they're going to say, oh, gotcha.
Right.
It's not going to work out well for you. The only thing I want to say about the Youngworth thing and potentially seeing one of the paintings is when I was doing research, so I did actually write about this on my blog, but it's one of my very first posts. So I blame you for scrolling all the way back there. Was that that reporter alleged that he was given some paint chips from the painting to test.
Right, I saw that too. Yeah.
Them, and like kind of maddeningly, they came back inconclusive. So they came back positive for being from the appropriate time period that the painting was painted.
Mm-hmm.
They could not definitively say, yes, these chips are from that painting. So what seems like something that's going to be such an amazing breakthrough is kind of like wah wah.
Right. It's kind of a halfway, like, shit. Even a very conclusive no would be better than, well, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Exactly.
God damn it.
It's the worst response.
Right.
So this should have been made into a movie starring David Spade and Chris Farley as Randy and Ricky, right? I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
So in the short room, you said there's the blue room, the Dutch room, and the short room.
Yes.
Is that right?
The most expensive piece of art in the gallery is actually on the third floor. And Maggie will know what it is, and I've forgotten what it is.
Titian's Rape of Europa.
Yes. They never even made it to the third floor. I guess they decided, okay, we can't steal the most valuable piece here. They went for the second most valuable piece here.
Why not? That's what I always think. Like, if you're going to rob one of the most famous art galleries in the country and you're stealing the second most valuable piece. Also, the Storm on the Sea of Galilee is the only known seascape that Rembrandt ever painted. Right. Like, that's an iconic painting. If you're stealing that, go up to the third floor and steal the Titian. What's stopping you? Like, no problem. Right. There were Botticelli's, there were Michelangelo's, like, there were tons of other stuff that was there were Raphael's, like there were other things in the museum. And so people debate, was it a calculated decision to steal, like, did they have a shopping list, or did they go in and say, okay, well, that thing's hanging by itself on a wall, that indicates,
and it's small.
Yeah. And we can cut it out of the frame and we can take it away. Or, did they go in being like, we want the Rembrandt, we want the this, we want the that, like, I don't know. The other interesting thing about the Bobby Donati thing, which ladders me up to thinking that he maybe did it, is that he apparently had like a super weird interest in Napoleon and in the like finial of some of the flags. Like outside of all of this, like people just knew that this was a funny quirk about him. And as you said, Brian, they spent so long like unscrewing all the screws,
trying to unscrew it and gave up. And so you ripped the
off.
top off.
Exactly. So why would you do all of that? And that's, I think, the least valuable thing that they stole. Why would you go through all that effort when you could just like cut a few more paintings out of their frames and be out of there, you know? So, but yeah, no, I don't like, for me, it doesn't make sense. Just go to the third floor and steal the Titian.
Right.
From the short room, were there any Toulouse-Lautrec paintings stolen?
No, that was not on the list. No.
Short Toulouse-Lautrec?
Oh,
nothing.
Nothing.
Oh, went over my head.
Sorry, we both missed that one.
I went a long way for a short. Yeah, that was. Is this the most? In terms of American art crime, is this the highest priced one that's happened?
Yes, I think so.
Highest price in the world, isn't it? I mean,
oh, is it in the world? Okay,
I think so.
Now they estimate all of those, everything that was stolen together, like in today's money, is worth $1 billion.
Holy shit!
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
It's crazy. And if I've never been there, I would really like to go. They have the frames hanging with nothing in them, like the real frames, just with nothing inside. And even looking at photos, it looks so eerie almost to see that, like just a room full of empty frames, and you know what happened.
Right.
Yeah, my brother-in-law is a big Vermeer fan. He was an art history major in college, and a Vermeer was stolen, you said, right? Yep. He did a lot with this, as I recall, a lot with light, just the way that like it would, golden hues and so forth would kind of spill from his paintings. And
yeah, he's a master. Every painting he has a light source, and you can see like how it's kind of applied to the subject. It's gorgeous.
I remember some conversations with college, but I mean, to me, this, as someone who doesn't know anything about this or much about art, it strikes me as an inside job as well. I mean, it seems to me like there's a lot going on there that they knew to walk them to the basement. I mean, I get lost in museums. I mean, we were in one in Montreal, and I could not find my way out of the damn place. So
they want to trap you in there.
Yeah, it's like a casino, but for art.
Yeah, I mean, so Rick died this year, and he was interviewed. I mean, so I caught part of an interview with him from the last year or two, where he was pretty circumspect about it. He's like, yeah, I get it. I was there. It's always, I totally understand. So whenever anyone wants to talk to me, I will happily talk to them. He's only 56 or 57 when he died. If suddenly his children have huge college endowments, I wonder how you managed to pay for a full ride to BU. But
then we have a bigger problem. Like, who bought the paintings? I feel, like, where did they go?
Yeah,
right. I mean, so
it has to be a multi-gajillion billionaire who can afford to buy these things and put him in his den. I mean, it has to be.
A Saudi prince who has all the money in the world and would probably show it off, because people that would come to his palatial house wouldn't care. It was a $300 million piece of stolen art.
Did you steal this? Yes. Yes, I did.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, in researching other stuff, people are like, some like Chinese billionaire or somebody just has it in a climate controlled room. Like, the people are kind of, I'll generally say, obviously I'll preface this by saying it's not great to steal priceless art that's supposed to be for everyone to see. But when somebody
you're really taking a risk there, Maggie. I know it's not
great. When somebody commissions a theft, it's a pretty safe bet that they're going to be actually taking care of it once it's in their possession. They're not just being like, okay, throw this in the scrap heap. Like, they want it for their collection because they're obsessed with it. So they're probably keeping it somewhere nice. And you're right. When people come over to their house, they're like, come down to the basement and see my one of a kind Rembrandt. Like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, it should be easy to find these things, but obviously not.
Yeah. I mean, Donald Trump would do this. This is his level. This is his level of sociopathy, right?
In
I'm not-
Mar-a-Lago, they've got
Look,
like
Right,
I need
right.
you to steal some stuff from me. I'll pay you back later.
I'll give you,
That's a heck
I'll
of
give you,
that's a
give
heck
you
of a
all the
heist
Trump,
story.
I'll give you all the Trump steaks you can eat. No problem. Um, yeah, but it's someone like him, right? That's his class of people that would say, yeah, crime. What's crime?
Exactly. Who cares? It doesn't apply to me because I'm
Right,
rich.
right.
This
Exactly.
needs to be made into I mean, I'm partial to heist films and prison break films, so
Yeah.
but this needs to be made into a movie. I
All I
mean,
can imagine is the Italian Job where they drop that safe through like 10 levels of a house and
oh
it lands in
yeah,
the boat and then they drive away. That's like that type of movie this needs to be made into.
Right.
yeah. Maybe with Jack Black as Rick or Randy. Jack
Yeah.
Black would be good in that
Yeah,
role.
get you.
Channing
We gotta get
Tatum.
you in the cast.
Channing Tatum with a big mustache. Oh, Channing Tatum and Jack Black. That would be a Ricky and Randy.
Dream cast.
Who do we know in California? Let me see.
Yeah.
Working on this.
Yeah, let's workshop that.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. That was
Yeah.
awesome.
That was
And
great.
Maggie, thank you for being able to add your genius level to our little stories that we tell. Now, this is the point in the unless we have anything else, this is the point
Nope.
in the show where we usually Brian drags out the curse word of the week, but our guest has a couple for us this week. Maggie, what do you have for us for the curse words of the week?
So I actually have two. And since I am Canadian, I thought I would pull out some Canadian slang for you.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
We have some fun slang words. I feel like more Canadian slang has been kind of percolating into the US a little bit, but two I know that you guys don't know. So the first one is puck bunny, and neither of these are actual bad words, I will say. But a puck bunny is basically I don't know if you've heard of like a buckle bunny. It's a similar thing where girls who go to rodeos they'll like hang around and wait to meet a cowboy. It's a similar thing, but with hockey. So if you're a puck bunny, you're like hanging out
trying to meet players. A puck
they're
bunny.
like waiting to meet a player, hopefully fall in love. Then they'll make it to the show, and then you'll be set for life.
Puck bunny.
That's that's what
Very
a puck
good.
bunny is. The second one I have is a toque. That's spelled TOQUE. It is a French word, and it literally is just what we call a beanie.
Right. So like a watch cap or a knit cap.
Yeah, like a knit cap. Sometimes it will have a pom-pom on the top. It doesn't need to.
It's a toque.
Like getting dressed to go out for the winter. You're like, okay, great. I got my coat. I got my mittens, my scarf, my toque. I'm ready to go.
Toque. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel that it should have the little button on top, the little buzzball on top.
Yeah, that's more French.
I'll write to the Prime Minister. I'll see if I can get those rules changed for you.
Well, thank you so much for
That's
the north of the border curse words of the week. Puck bunny and toque. That too could be a movie.
Yes.
And just to clarify, I've been to your fair city twice, not in forever. And one time I was there, eating in a restaurant actually with my father, and the waitress said, "Americans, right?" And like, yeah, Texas. Like, holy shit, how'd you guess that? Your accent? Like, I don't really. Okay, whatever. But I was saying in a very, in her mind, I guess, very pronounced way, Toronto with 3 syllables, and she was saying, no, it's just Toronto. It's like
Toronto,
Tonto with an R. Toronto. It's 2 syllables.
It's a dead giveaway.
Okay.
No second T, right? You don't pronounce the second T, Toronto.
I always tell people to spell it in their mind, CHRONO, Toronto. That's how you say it. Same actually with Montreal. That's a giveaway too. If you say Montreal, you're not local.
Okay. So
there's
MUN, Montreal.
There were other giveaways for people that I wasn't from Montreal when I was there. Je ne parle pas français.
Pronunciation isn't one. That's perfect.
You were saying "K"?
No hable Montrealese. Are you ready for my story, guys?
Go.
All right. So I'm going to leave this up to you guys as whether you decide this is actually art, depending on how you feel about it. Brian probably knows what's coming because he knows that I'm a geek. I'm going to start by telling you about a guy by the name of Gil Kane. You ever heard that name? Either of you? Gil Kane?
Mm-hmm.
He was actually born Eli Katz, so I lied to you. Eli Katz in Riga, Latvia on April 6, 1926. The Katz family immigrated to Brooklyn in 1929, just in time for the Great Depression.
Oh.
His father was a poultry salesman. I'm not sure how great a job that was in Depression era New York, but Eli was able to attend by the time he got to high school years the
You want a
School of
pigeon?
this, and that would have solved a lot of problems. It's Wob. Young Eli was able to attend the School of Industrial Art in Manhattan for his high school career, where he learned how to do magazine illustrations and things like that. It was here that Eli dropped out his senior year to pursue a job at MLJ Comics. He wanted to be a comic book artist. It was a big publisher back in the 40s and still operates today under its more well-known name, its title character, Archie Comics. So that's who he wanted to work for back in the 1940s, because they had more than just Archie. They had superhero comics and westerns and other stuff. His job there at MLJ didn't allow him to draw, however. He had to work on panel borders and setting word balloons. That's what he was doing. He wasn't drawing anything, because the original art on a comic book page is much bigger than the comic book itself, and then it's photographed and shrunk down to size. So that's what he would do. He would set the borders for the other artists so they could go in and then actually do the art part of it. He had probably wished that he'd stayed in school, because he was fired after only 3 weeks of doing this at MLJ Comics. So now he's out of a job and he's out of high school. Undaunted, he headed across the city to Binder Publishing and worked there for 3 weeks, because he was rehired at MLJ. So they were rather picky, and I don't know what was going on with that. But he kind of started getting his chops, learning how to draw and do these things. He did strips as well, besides comic books. He started regular work for DC Comics, the company that gives us Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, in the late 1940s. At some point, Eli changed his name to one he would carry for the rest of his life, Gil Kane. So what he started going by. Kane drew the late 50s revival of DC superheroes Green Lantern and the Atom. The characters are updated from the 40s with new alter egos, new superpowers, and sleeker, more modern costumes. He worked for Marvel Comics, DC, and other companies into the 1960s and onwards. Of particular note was a run on The Amazing Spider-Man in the 1970s. He worked alongside such artists as the great Jack Kirby, who co-created Captain America, Steve Ditko, who co-created Spider-Man and Doctor Strange for Marvel Comics, and John Romita, who had the unenviable position of having to take over when Steve Ditko left The Amazing Spider-Man in 1966. He also left Marvel Comics. So John Romita had to follow the most popular artist at Marvel and did great with it. In fact, a lot of people consider his Spider-Man version to be the one. But Gil Kane was also a big name and a big deal in comics. And he started a career for Marvel again in the mid-1970s. Let's put a pin in that, because he's about to meet the second character of our story. I want to tell you about a guy named Archie Goodwin now. Archie Goodwin was born in Kansas City, Missouri in 1937, so he's 11 years younger than Gil. His comics career began as a fan. He formed a cartoonist club while in high school and started writing his own fanzines, articles about comics. In the 1950s, he was particularly fond of entertaining comics, EC Comics. EC Comics is the reason we eventually had the Comics Code Authority, because these were really gory comic books. It's got the infamous hypodermic needle being stabbed in the eye panel, for example. These were horror comics. They're considered to be little mini masterpieces because they featured some of the great artists of the 1950s. And he was a big fan. Now, he attended the School for Visual Arts in New York City and grew into a triple threat. He was a penciler, a writer, and an editor. His career took off with Warren Publishing in the mid to late 1960s. This was a comic magazine, larger in format, called Creepy. Creepy was the playground where he wrote stories reflecting his love of EC horror, crime, and war comics from his youth. At the ripe old age of 27, he took over as editor-in-chief of Warren Publishing, a job he held from 64 to 67. He worked for Marvel Comics as a writer in the late 60s and edited books for DC Comics briefly in the early 70s. Then he found himself at Marvel Comics in 1976 as the interim editor-in-chief. He said, I'll take it over for a couple of years till you find someone to replace Stan Lee, the legendary Stan Lee. And that was where he met up with Gil Kane, who was working there as a penciler. Now, according to comic book historian and friend of the pod, Bill Field, the story I'm about to relate to you has been part of comic book lore for a long time, more than 15 years. In fact, maybe twice as long as that. The basic story goes like this. Comic book publishers used to keep all of the original art pages, the actual penciled and inked art, and not return them to the artists. The thinking was that if the artist was paid by the company, the resulting work belonged to the company. This has changed a great deal since then. But in the 1970s, once you handed in the finished art, it belonged to Marvel or DC or whatever publisher you handed it into. There's been a market for original comic art for a long time. Now at comic book conventions, you might see original art pages being sold by an artist's agent, or you might consult online dealers or live auctions to buy these pages featuring work from your favorite penciler. Now I'm getting to the heart of the matter. The story that circulated for years in the industry and comic fandom is that Gil Kane stole original art from publishers and then sold said art to private collectors. Not necessarily his original art either, but any art pages by popular and influential artists. So for me, it's one thing to steal your own art back. He was doing more than that. He's such popular artists as the aforementioned Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and John Romita. Some folks in the industry have said that everyone at the time did it, stealing back their art, but Gil stole other people's. As the tale goes, Archie Goodwin caught him in the act late one night while Kane was penciling for Marvel and Goodwin was serving as the interim editor-in-chief. This would have happened sometime between 1976 and 1978. This is the stuff comic book historians and fans discuss when they're not discussing the medium itself. What happened to this artist or that writer? Did someone really dangle an editor outside a window many stories above New York City demanding a paycheck? Did another artist leave because someone else was taking the credit on a particular comic book title? Did Gil Kane really steal original art in some kind of comic book black market deal? Who would win in a fight, Betty or Veronica? More than one comic book professional seems to think that this is true, as this comic art heist has been told as a roman à clef by more than one comic book writer. Ed Brubaker's Bad Weekend, one of my favorite writers in comics, tells the story of an artist trying to recover his stolen original art. One character in particular has more than a passing resemblance to Gil Kane, both in personality and appearance. Writer-artist Howard Chaykin actually served as Gil Kane's assistant during his own early comic book career in the 1970s. Chaykin's book, Hey Kids Comics, presents a parade of analog characters from comic book history. Writers, artists, and editors in this story all have real-world counterparts or are amalgamations of real persons. These versions of Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, Ramona Fradon, Will Eisner, Julie Schwartz, and others are recognizable to comic book fans such as myself. The Gil Kane stand-in during this story is named Ray Clark, a well-dressed, fastidious, smooth-talking artist described as, quote, morally compromised, artistically inconsistent, and evidently become confused as to why his self-regard isn't shared by his colleagues and friends. In short, he's a real asshole. In the series, Clark is nabbed while trying to steal original art pages. An art director says to him, Ray, what do you say for the foreseeable future that we get the pages printed and published before they get disappeared? Does that work for you? To which Ray responds, I was just giving them a closer look. This is clearly based on the story of Archie Goodwin catching Gil Kane in the alleged act of thievery. And finally, the strongest anecdote comes from Ted McKeever, who tells his own story of working the business in his comic called Pencilhead. In issue 3, his character, named Poodwaddle, has lunch with a longtime professional named Alfie Wingood, which sounds a whole lot like Archie Goodwin. Wingood tells Poodwaddle a story. Here it is. This is back when I was editor-in-chief of Happy Time Comics, Marvel Comics for the real world.
Right.
Most nights I ended up working way past midnight, deadlines and all that jazz. One night I was burning the midnight oil, and here comes Dill Crane. Strolling in with that usual stick-up-the-ass walk of his. He acknowledges me, and then he says he's got some work to do he needs to take care of. Thinking nothing of it, I go back to my office. Time passes, and I hear Dill leaving, carrying a portfolio. I figure he's just taking his work home to finish. No big deal. A few weeks pass, and once again I'm in the office, way past midnight, doing the usual deadline crunch. And as before, in strolls Dill, same acknowledgement, same saying he's got work to do, same stick up the ass walk. Time passes. Dill leaves once again, holding a portfolio. This time I call out to him asking, is everything okay? Dill responds, saying good night. Taking work home to finish, I again assume. He's worked here for years. What else could it be? Jump ahead about a week. Deja vu, same scenario. Me working late, in walks Dill, blah, 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 work to do, blah, blah, blah. And then it hit me. He isn't coming in with a portfolio, but when he leaves, he's had one tucked under his arm. So I go back to work, and about an hour later, here comes Dill with, you guessed it, a portfolio. I get up and walk over to him, saying, hey, Dill, wait up, hold a minute. He pauses. And I say, you didn't come in here with a portfolio, so where did that one come from? He responds with a simple, it's mine. I say, great, let me see what you're working on, as I reach out and take it from under his arm. That son of a bitch had a stack of Zach Gerby, Bitco, and Gramita pages stuffed into the damn portfolio. Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and John Romita pages. That bastard was going back into the archives and stealing original art pages by the handful. God knows how many more he'd taken when I wasn't there. Needless to say, I took those pages back, and to avoid any legal action, I demanded that he immediately return every single page she'd stolen. The next day, he came in with about 35 pages. But I never truly believed it was everything he took. And there was no way anyone could prove it because there was no exact filing system for art back then. So that was that. Afterward, it was ruled that he never again be given another cover, penciling, or inking job at Happy Time. He was banned. Gil Kane is an inductee into the Will Eisner Comic Book Hall of Fame and the Harvey Award Jack Kirby Hall of Fame, two great honors in the comic book world. He died in the year 2000. Archie Goodwin died in 1998 after an 8-year cancer battle. He's remembered as a real mensch and has many awards to his name, including multiple Shazam Awards for writing, an Eagle Award in magazine publishing, the Inkpot Award given by the San Diego Comic-Con, and the Bob Clampett Will Eisner Humanitarian Award. And as a closer to this story, this alleged art theft, here's some recent prices for original comic art sold at auction. Page 1 of Amazing Spider-Man number 18 from 1964, penciled by Steve Ditko, sold at auction, one page of original art for $432,000. The cover to Amazing Spider-Man number 100 from 1971, penciled by John Romita, the man who replaced Steve Ditko on the title, sold for $478,000. And page 1 of Tales of Suspense number 59, featuring Captain America, penciled by the great Jack Kirby, sold for $630,000. And that is the story of Gil, Archie, and an alleged comic art heist.
Dorks with money.
Sources for this story were Ed Brubaker's 2020 collection Criminal, the Deluxe Edition Volume 3, Howard Chaykin's 2019 and 2022 Hey Kids Comics Volume 1 and 2, Ted McKeever's Pencilhead Issue 3 from Image, all of those from Image Comics, CollectedEditions.com website, the message board with a thread, Hey Kids Comics, Who's Who, the Heritage Auction site, Wikipedia, and consultation with comic historian Bill Field in San Antonio, Texas. What do you think?
Yeah, I had no idea the values were that high for a single page of artwork. That's unbelievable. So he was, I mean, and those panels, I mean, when they're printed, they're 8x10, maybe a little smaller, 7x9.
Yeah, roughly 8x11. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, your standard package paper.
And so the originals are 24x36 or something. I mean,
not that big, but they're considerably bigger. Yeah, they're considerably. Right. You think I would know? I've got one hanging on my wall. Not an expensive one like that.
I was gonna say, maybe you stole it.
Oh yeah, not me.
so he was just swiping them and then selling them, or I mean, there's no evidence to corroborate him selling them, I guess.
But the story is he would sell them under the table at comic book conventions.
So he probably wasn't getting the kind of money that people are getting now for them. But
Right.
I'm assuming he was making a decent amount of money for back then.
Yeah, and he was also known as a real clothes horse, a guy who liked to party.
I was going to ask you, like, what was his lifestyle like? Because if
Mhm.
he all of a sudden was wearing like a shabby blazer every day to work, and then he shows up in
Right.
like an Armani suit,
Right.
I'm like, okay,
Right.
I'm picturing this.
And one of
Did
the
he have a
reasons
coke habit?
one of
Well,
these
there you go.
one of the reasons that these some of these pieces go for so much is because one, they're either done by a very famous artist like Steve Ditko or Jack Kirby. I looked into buying a Steve Ditko piece, and the cheapest one I could find was $15,000, which is well outside of my price range. And it's for something with no known. It's not a Spider-Man page or a Doctor Strange page. It's like a horror story he did in the 50s. But part of the reason is because a lot of this original art, because it's so old, has gotten lost over the years through theft or moving offices or what have you. Legend has it that Steve Ditko, who was one of the artists that actually, he said, I signed a contract, the art is yours. So he never really, Steve Ditko had a very interesting way of looking at the world. Legend has it that he was using old pieces of his comic art as cutting blocks in his studio to cut other pieces on.
Oh my gosh.
Which makes people like me who love Steve Ditko's art just shudder to think that how many pages did he go through? I mean, he worked on Amazing Spider-Man for 38 issues at 22, 24 pages a comic. That's a lot of money.
Tens of millions of dollars, right? Right. Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, that's
Yeah,
a
very
comic
cool.
art heist that may or may not happen, but most likely happened.
I feel like it probably happened. People wouldn't be telling and retelling that story unless they were convinced that
Yeah.
it had happened or they had witnessed it happening. So, I mean, I know it's circumstantial, but I'm inclined to believe that that is the truth.
Yeah, and it comes from a guy. It comes from Alfie Wingood or Archie Goodwin, who was just one of the nicest, most well-liked people in the entire industry.
So there you go.
So
Even more incriminating.
why would he lie?
Right.
Yeah.
And Gil Kane had a reputation as kind of being a jerk. So
I mean, people don't get reputations for nothing. So
that's right.
Very true.
Anyway,
Yeah, very cool. Two art
yeah, I
crimes.
thought so. Two art crimes. Yeah,
oh, I love that.
yeah. So, the moral of the story is organize your art files. Make
And
sure
have
no
a
one
security
Right.
system.
Right.
have a
And-
security system.
And crime pays. No.
Wait, what?
No.
Maybe not.
Maybe not say that. Okay. Never mind. Withdrawn.
So, Maggie, are you happy you came on to be our first guest genius? I sure am.
Yes.
No, I'm very happy. Thank you for preparing those stories. One that I definitely do know, and it's always great. I love hearing about stuff that I don't know. So that was super interesting. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, and
The website is pricelessblog.squarespace.com.
That's right.
Pricelessblog.squarespace.com. So check, books up there, check that out. Download and read at your leisure. Lots of good stuff there.
And I'm actually going to, I know I said it off mic, but I don't think I said it here. Did I talk about the Clifford Still Museum here? I don't think I talked about it in the recording. There's an artist named Clifford Still who one of his paintings was defaced right here in Denver at his museum. And I'm going to go check. I'd never heard of that museum before. It's right around the corner from the Molly Brown house. So sometime in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to go check out the Clifford Still Museum here in Denver and check out his artwork because it looks really great. And there's just an insane story of someone who tried to
Urinate on it. Was it urinate?
Yes.
Pee on the painting?
She missed, apparently. According to Maggie,
Right.
she missed, and it just kind of got on the wall as opposed to getting on the painting. But
Yeah, thankfully.
yes.
Report back. Let us know
Right.
what you think.
I will. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll probably do it here in the next couple of weeks.
Right.
So
If you're gonna throw urine, maybe practice first. I'm just saying. Right.
Game. I also feel like probably it would be easier for a man objectively than a woman to pee on a painting, just like logistically. So
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe just bring it in some sort of receptacle so you can.
or maybe
Whatever.
just if you're so inclined to throw your urine, you can do that in the comfort of your own home.
Right. That's an indoor activity. Yeah, go home.
In the house only. In the house only.
All right,
What's the
thanks,
matter
Maggie.
what's the matter with people raising their kids to throw urine outside of the house?
Kids these days, that's a home activity.
And
Goddamn urine thrower.
yes, thank you so much for being on the
Yeah,
show.
that was great.
We appreciate it so
we
much.
hugely appreciate that. This will come out here soon. And thanks for everyone, tagging along with us and listening to us yet again, our nonsense. Again, check us out at dreamidiots.com. If you can, give us 5 stars and shoot us a review on Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening to us. That would be great. Check us out, dreamidiots.com. I said that. Well, there's merchandise there, and Instagram and Facebook, we're at Dream Idiots, and Patreon, we're at Dream Idiots. And then you can drop any of us a line, actually, probably even including Maggie if you want, at dreamidiotspodcast@gmail.com. And thanks for tagging along.
Yep. And, have a good week. Go to an art museum. Be nice to the docents. Be nice to the security guards. And be good to each other, too. Thanks.